So I just turned the recording on. Also, because you also kindly muted your microphones, if you do have any questions or comments or anything, you can put them right in the little chat box, and Vera will get to them as she can. And I wanted to also let you know that the first Friday of January, there's going to be another of Vera's famous cooking series that we'll do healthy New Year recipes. So I will send you all the link to sign up for that if you like when we sign the when I send out the recipe and ingredients after this. Thank you all so much for coming tonight, and I want to thank Veronique so much. She's a wonderful friend to the library, and also about to be a newly appointed alternate trustee. So we're so lucky to have her and so happy to have her doing this. So I'm going to turn things over to Vera.
Good evening, everybody. Hope you're having a good Friday and that your Friday night will be even better with this little cookie class. Please throw all the questions you have in the chat so Trisha can read them to me and I can answer as we go. So this class, I'm not going to do as much hands-on cooking because I really couldn't figure how I'm going to bake and let cookie dough rest for 30 minutes to 12 hours in this 1 hour class. So I have baked most of everything ahead, but we're still going to bake something to get, I'm going to bake something to show you. And so I've tried to choose cookies that you wouldn't see in your typical Christmas swap or in like the magazines that you get or that you look at that usually have the same kind of cookies to bake for Christmas every year. So my cookies are kind of European inspired, not especially French. Like there's speculoos, which are originated in the Netherlands. The little sablé kind of Linzer cookies, but they are not, and we call them sablés, which means like sandy in France. And then we have the little Earl Grey tea bags. So they're made with Earl Grey crushed up, and I added chocolate just to make a little variation. I will tell you that in France, most of the cookies, or even in Europe for like Saint Nicholas, which is December 6th, they don't really have chocolate. There's a lot of spices. Most of them, we call them biscuits, and biscuits are not biscuits that you know here. Biscuits for us are basically kind of a hybrid between sugar cookies and all the way to shortbread. So some are cookies with eggs and some cookies with no eggs. So as you most know, you can't call anything that has eggs in them shortbread because shortbread does not have eggs. So there's different names to call them. We call them sablés, we call them biscuits, and there's obviously hundreds of variation of them. Some are more traditional than others. And so my inspiration, I just want to share, this is my French book, and it's called The Bible of the Little Cookies. And what I love in this book is that every cookie has a photo with it. And note I have all my little markers for all the cookies I'm going to make for this season. But what's nice is that all the cookies are pretty actually simple. They all have a little picturesque list of ingredients. And most of them don't really need any super special ingredients. Most of those cookies were made with almond flour, regular flour, tea powder, spices, regular jam, unsalted butter, eggs, confectioner's sugar, really nothing like, that you'd have to all of a sudden rush to the store to buy special. So that's what I really like about those cookies. So I'm going to talk to you about the Earl Grey cookies, biscuits first, and we call them biscuits. So that's how they came out. And I cut them by hand. the dough looked like this because I crushed tea leaves, and you can either crush tea leaves in them, or you can just use an Earl Grey tea bag and just like sprinkle the content of the tea bag, because obviously it's very fine, crushed in a tea bag already. So instead of buying fresh tea leaves and crushing them, you can just get a tea bag. And you can also use other kind of teas. I've used Russian tea, which is kind of a Christmas traditional tea. It's kind of very strong. It has a lot of spices in it. That makes it taste really good too. And so with all those cookies, I'm gonna say that one of the secrets is, one, not to work the dough too much. So out of those 3 types of cookies, the only cookie that I used on electric mixer were these sablés that we'll talk about later. Those I just use my hands. I just use my hands to mix the ingredients. Flour and butter, you just mix it really easily. When you use your hands to mix flour and butter, to clean your hands, it's really easy. You just use flour. So you just have like a teaspoon, tablespoon of flour at the ready. You rub your hands in flour and your hands will be clean. So no butter or dough residue will stick to your fingers. So that's a little tip right there. And a lot of those, that's what I like too. You don't need to get like 7 different instruments to prepare the dough. You just use your hands, or use wooden spoons are really good too. Regular wooden spoon to mix dough for cookies really works well. And then obviously use a rolling pin. So those doughs, the reason why I couldn't do them during the class is all those doughs need to rest. And some of them need to rest longer than other ones. So this one was just about half an hour resting. That means you make the dough into a bowl, you wrap it with saran wrap, and you put it in the fridge. And you just let it rest. What happens is the molecules bind together of the butter with all the other components, and it makes for a dough that's not going to have like some kind of dusty spot where you didn't mix well enough or whatever. So it's going to give the dough time to work itself through. And then use a rolling pin. Don't forget, when you do cookies, either you can dust your counter surface with flour, or another easier solution is you just use 2 pieces of parchment paper and you put the dough in between and you roll through the parchment paper. 2 things it accomplishes for you. 1, no flour all around and on your cookies. 2, when you're done rolling, just lift the top piece of parchment paper, you cut your shapes, and then you can put your shapes on both the parchment paper and use it to bake it on your baking sheet. So it's and today I baked 4 different cookies. I reused the parchment paper over and over. So the parchment paper is also doesn't have to be thrown out every time you bake something on it, especially if it's cookies. I mean, if it's something different that's gonna leak oil or something salty or something like that, then you wouldn't want to do that. But with the cookies, it's been fine. The other reason you want to rest the dough is as soon as you start rolling it, you're heating up the molecules and you're starting to change the composition of the dough again. So if you get it really hot, like if you're like, sorry, if you're like rolling to get to the thickness you want, once you cut your shapes, you want to lay them on a baking sheet and you want to put your baking sheet like 5 minutes in the fridge again, so that it has time to kind of like sit and cool down before you put it in the oven. Because otherwise what's going to happen is, as if you put fairly warm dough, even if it's not warm to your touch, it's still like warm as a composition. If you put it in the oven, it's going to leak butter as soon as it connects with the heat that's in the oven. And so the result will be you'll have biscuits, cookies that will be really dry because the butter is going to ooze out. And usually you'll see it like kind of bubbling around your cookie, and that's not a good sign. That you want the butter to stay in your cookies. You don't want it to seep out on your baking sheet. If it seeps out, then you just have what's left, which was like flour and sugar. And yeah, there'll be a little butter, but it's going to be really hard. So the way to avoid your cookies to be too hard is to rest the dough, not to overwork them, and to rest the dough once again after you roll it and put it on the cookie sheet. So I've been holding on this. Does it make them flat? What makes them flat? Okay, to be followed.
If you don't cool them first, is that why my cookies are always flat? Is it
Probably because yeah, the butter will just ooze out. So then you'll just have something like it will never. I mean,
a flat,
not all
hard
the
cookie?
right.
Okay, that's my problem. Thanks, V.
Yes. So in the end, you might as well have put water in them instead of butter, and you would have achieved the same consistency. So that's why. So rolling pin. So last year I got this really cool rolling pin because my husband watching the baking show, and I actually never used it until today, and I found out it's awesome. So you know, like these recipes that tell you like try to get 1/4 inch thickness or 1/8 inch thickness, 3 to 4 millimeter. And what this rolling pin do, instead of my good old-fashioned one, is it has rings and it tells you, I don't know if you can see, it tells you the thickness that you want to roll things at. So you have a bunch of rings and you choose, like, do you want 10 millimeter cookies, thick cookies, or do you want 6 millimeters / 1/4 inch cookies? And it goes all the way down to 1/16 of an inch, which is super thin. It would be like a trill, except you don't roll a trill, but something like that. So that's great. So basically, as soon as you roll and the rollers on the sides touch your counter surface, you have the perfect thickness and stop rolling. So that's a good one because it's really hard. I found I never really get the right thickness when I follow a recipe. Either it's too thick or it's too thin. So that's a good one. Plus, it has measurements on its face. So some of the cookies I said like cut 1 by 3 inches. Well, you can use the measurements on the face of the rolling pin if you're not using one of those rolling mats that has all the measurements on them, which I have, but I never use. So that's the tea cookies. The recipe said dip them in chocolate. I don't think it brings anything to it. I'll add a little note in the recipes. I'm gonna actually add, try to do like some like lemon glaze. I think it would go better with the Earl Grey. But it's up to people's taste. I know most people mostly like to have some kind of chocolate on their cookies. I just think that something lemony or even orangey would go better with that. And you can just do a simple glaze with lemon juice and confectioner's sugar, and it will dry nicely. You can do a light one, you could just do the edges or do the whole bag if you want. And obviously it was made to look like a little tea bag, which I thought was a really cool feature. So this was the Earl Grey cookie. I'm putting the leftover dough back in the fridge. And so this, I'll note that on these recipes, I wrote like the rest time, which is like, you know, the time you should put it in the fridge. It says 30 minutes, and you don't have time to do it. For example, you would do the batter to the dough tonight and you can't bake them until tomorrow. Leave it in the fridge. All you have to do is get it out maybe 25, 30 minutes before you're gonna roll it. But it's not gonna do anything bad to them if you leave them longer. The recipes that tell you need to leave it 12 hours, you absolutely need to do 12 hours because there is a reason for that. Usually that's the recipes with spices, and that's so that all the flavors are bind together during the resting time. So that's the other cookie. So those cookies, I made them big on purpose. Those are speculoos. And in Europe, we call them speculoos with 2 O's or speculas with 2 A's. So they're really crisp. And usually you find them in the store and they look like a windmill. And that's really the original Netherlands shape. And they were imprinted with the mold one by one at a time. Usually they were baked only for the Christmas holiday and especially for Saint Nicholas. And Saint Nicholas is almost bigger than Christmas in Germany, in the Netherlands. It was in history. It still is. It is a big, big, big tradition. Some of my family is from Alsace, which is the eastern part of France. And Saint Nicholas for them is like their Christmas. They bake special cookies, bredela, manelas. Those are more like brioche type cookies. Like they rise a lot. They look like the old gingerbread men, but they are like fluffy and airy, and they rise. And so those were more the traditional cookie from Netherlands. And in Germany, they mostly call them sprinkle. And the sprinkle recipe is a little different recipe, but not much. So the differences between those cookies in France and in Netherlands and here is the different spices that are used. So the traditional, I gave you the recipe for the traditional ones. So the traditional one use something that's called 4 spices. And it looks kind of like that. It looks kind of light. 4 spices is not allspice. Allspice is 1 berry, not a mix of berries. That's 4 different spices mixed together. I gave you the recipe. So basically, it's 2 measures of ground white pepper. And I had a hard time finding it actually, because I don't know, I thought it was pretty common where I grew up, but it's not common here. So it's 2 tablespoons of white pepper to make a mix. And then it's 1 tablespoon of nutmeg, and all this will be written in the recipes. 1 tablespoon of ground ginger and 1 tablespoon of ground clove. So some of you are probably thinking like, wow, so there's like double the amount of everything in the white pepper. And it's actually, it's spicy, but it's like a spicy gingerbread kind of. It's very interesting. It smells fabulous when you bake it. It's a super interesting flavor that I'm actually rediscovering because my mom and my grandma used to cook with that. But in my little Bible book that I got a couple of years ago, there's several recipes that use the 4 spices. And I didn't realize you can use it even in custards to make like a special like a 4 spice creme brulee. So I'm gonna be trying some more recipes, but I just made 1 batch of the 4 spice mix, and you just make it yourself. Then you can just put it in a little jar, keep it for later if you want to use it again. And so hopefully I'm not gonna sneeze because of the pepper. And so that's what's in those cookies. So basically these cookies have this light brown color because of the brown sugar that's used. And you can use light or you can use dark. I used light brown sugar. The dark one will give you a slightly darker color. The original recipe is made with light brown sugar. And this one was the same. I mixed it by hand. So the only difference with this one is it starts with melted butter, and then it does have baking soda. That's why the cookies kind of like spread out of control. Honestly, I wanted them to be smaller because that's what I cut them out of. She's an ancient tin mold, and so it was a little tighter than that. So I got it definitely spreads a little. And that one uses baking soda. The first one, the Earl Grey biscuits, a lot of the biscuits cookies in France don't use any leavening agent. And that's why like when you bake them, you can bake them really close on the baking sheet because they don't spread. Those, they did spread. And traditionally, those in today's world, they are cut in rectangular shape, but then they are crinkled on the edges like that, but I could not find a mold in time. You can also use an imprinting rolling pin. So I got one of those, and disclaimer, it's going back because those rolling pins are really tricky. They'll do a good job if the cavities with the characters are carved enough, but that's not carved enough. So basically, when I rolled it on a cookie, I got a really nice looking imprint. But then when I baked it, see, I get kind of like a mishmash of some details, but not. So that's not what it should look. It should look like a really good one, a rolling pin, an embossing rolling print. When the cookie bakes, it should keep the indentations in it. So, and if you use an embossing pin, or if you have one, just don't push too hard so that you keep the thickness, original thickness of the cookie. So that's kind of like the last thing that you do before putting them in the oven, and just like slowly roll on it. Obviously, you can't do a couple passes because obviously you lose the motif. But just do one pass quickly, and normally one pass with like low pressure should be enough to have a nice result, which I unfortunately did not get. Apologies for that. And in Germany, in the Netherlands, the traditional one now they also have these Springular molds. So they are either and sometimes you can find some in antique stores. I've seen some at the collector's eye and should have gotten them. They have those fantastic designs. They're usually made out of some type of like clay / pottery glazed that resists to heat, and you can mold the cookies in them. And those are usually really traditional. They have the men with the wooden clog shoes, and they have the windmills, and they have like kind of like pastoral scenes from the countryside in the Netherlands, and those are amazing. So I'm gonna be definitely having my eye out looking for some of those. And the last recommendation for those was, so those are the dough sat in the fridge for 12 hours. And that's really because of the spices. You want the spices to infuse in the dough. And if you bake them, like if you put them in the fridge for 30 minutes and then you bake them, you're not gonna have the same taste, and it's not gonna bake the same. So those were baked 20 minutes, and they really don't change color much from when you put them in the oven until they're done. And that's one of the things with biscuits, cookies in general. Some cookies you're always expecting, like, you know, they're gonna golden on the edges, they're gonna puff up, and you're gonna have some big signs that they are ready. Those were really not, and the only advice from the recipe was like 20 minutes, get them out, and then transfer them to a chilling rack for about 2 hours before you even think of consuming them. Those you also want to store in a metal tin if possible. Cookies of that type, they do not keep well in Tupperware / plastic containers or plastic bags. If you're gonna freeze them, if you wanna make a bunch and you're waiting for all your other cookies to be ready for your swap or for a party you're having, bake them, cool them the time that's required in your recipe, and freeze them immediately so they don't get stale. Because as soon as a cookie is cooled down, and especially cookies, obviously most cookies have butter, but not like processed, you know, they're not like processed, highly processed food that you buy at the store. Homemade cookies, as soon as they're cooled down, they are basically starting to stale if they stay in the ambient air. So as soon as your cookies are cool, you want to get them in a tin. Metal tin is the best. You can wrap some on a plate with aluminum foil, like really tight. But the metal tin is usually the way for me. That's really the best way to keep the cookies consistency as you want them. You know, some cookies, people like them soft, or they like them more like, you know, like tender. Well, that's not what those biscuits or cookies are for. those cookies are designed to be kind of like crunchier, crispier, and that's the advice. Also, do not overbake them. 20 minutes is 20 minutes. In baking, I know we had classes before together. In baking, I will really be want you to follow strictly guidelines on one, measurements. So all my measurements here are in grams. I transcribe them into ounces for people who don't have a scale that does grams, but grams is the most accurate measurement for any of the ingredients. And follow the recipe. In baking, it's not like cooking. Cooking, you're making a chili, you want to throw a little more chili powder, you want to throw a little less tomato paste, that's fine. You'll still get something and you know the consistency you like. Baking, it can make or break. That's why always read the recipe before, so you don't forget an ingredient or come to step 3 and you realize you didn't do step 2, because most likely maybe it's gonna taste okay, but it's not gonna taste as intended. So be careful with the measurements, be careful with preheating the oven all the time, cooling your dough, and don't overbake. If it said 12 minutes and you're looking at 11 and you're like, oh, this needs way more, I'm gonna wait until 14. I can pretty much guarantee it's gonna be like as hard as a rock. Those cookies, if you leave them like 1 or 2 minutes, and I've done it, they'll be like hardtack. You might as well either like, you know, drop them in your mug of tea and wait for 2 minutes and fish them out with your spoon, or unless you want to break your teeth. So just baking is more refined, it's more precise than cooking. That's why some people, they're like, oh, I hate baking, it never comes out right. Baking is less forgiving than just cooking. So remember that. So I think before I talk about the little sablés, which are, like I said, not linzer, not shortbread, I'm gonna make the third recipe right here on the class, which is almond and orange blossom bites. So those are little bites that you can make right in a muffin tin. And I don't know what happens with this. Right in a muffin tin. They keep well. You can include them in your little box or bag of because they'll be hard enough, they'll hold their shape well enough. And usually people have like those when I've put those in their boxes. And they're made with almond flour, confectioner's sugar, a little unsalted melted butter. I'm gonna remelt a little bit, and candied orange peel, and orange blossom water. So orange blossom water, it's used a lot in North African cuisine, like Moroccan cuisine, Tunisian cuisine. It's really fragrant. It's not as like rose water where people are like, oh, it's so sweet, I hate it. It tastes like perfume. It smells very perfumey, but when you bake it, it's not as how do I say, as intrusive as rose flower water. So I use that in crepes. It comes out really good. And you can use that in any recipe that says, for example, use like 2 tablespoons of Cointreau, or like Grand Marnier, which is orange liqueur. If you don't want to do the alcohol one, just use orange blossom water. You'll be pleasantly surprised. You can still find it in the aisle where they sell like almonds and nuts and chocolate, baking chocolate and everything like that, I believe. And they usually are, they have orange blossom water and rose water pretty close together. So just make sure you get the right one. And that's the orange blossom water. They also have it, if you can't find it at your regular grocery store, they have it at the Asian store that I don't know the name of. That's off Woodbury Ave in Fort Smith. That has all sorts of fabulous, like not always found in other places, ingredients for cooking and baking. So I'm gonna reheat my little butter here, just so that. And this one is going to be at 350. So the other thing I have to say is most of those cookie recipes, it's either 325 or 350. You'll rarely see a cookie that you have to heat the oven up to 400. So same, if you see something that doesn't sound right in a recipe, or you're trying to do something and it's like, what's going on here? Just take a breath, pause, and reread your recipe. So remember, always preheat the oven. And I'm hoping we'll have those out before the end of the class so you can see what they look like. So this one is very straightforward. Whisk together confectioner's sugar. And there was mostly almond flour and a little bit of all-purpose flour. This was a whole ground almond flour, and but you can also use the almond flour that's made from the blanched almonds. Both of them are the same. This one is more nutritious. It's kind of like saying whole grain and white. But so I like this one. A lot of people like to use the super fine from the blanched almonds because obviously it's very clear. This one, you're going to see some little traces of brown flecks in it. So you'll see that in the end product. So it's really a personal choice. They both have the same taste. They both do the same function. So we have just mix these little flours and confectioner's sugar. Add an egg. And another thing I do is a lot of time I divide recipes by 2. So the recipe says, 2 eggs and double the flour, etc. The only place where it's tricky to divide recipes in half is the leavening agent. So if it says 1 teaspoon of baking soda and for the whole recipe, and you divide the recipe in half, I always put a tad more than half of the teaspoon, just to make sure it leavens correctly. And that's really the only place where I've been. If you go by dividing weight, you'll never have a problem. So that's mixed up. I'm gonna add your melted butter. And butter, I want to remind everybody, unsalted butter, never salted butter. Even though some recipes tell you to add a little pinch of salt, it's not the same. So unsalted butter, good butter if you can. Cheap butters have a lot of water content in America. So you will not end up with a good result if you use really cheap butter. Recently, there was this truly grass-fed butter from Ireland, which is kind of like Kerrygold. It was on super sale at Market Basket, and it's great. And what I do is when I buy butter like that, because I didn't really know if it was good or not, because I've never heard of it. Try it on a piece of bread, just a piece of softened butter. Just try it on a piece of bread and just like take time to see, does it taste like something, or does it just taste like fat and leaves a deposit on your tongue? And if you try to compare a couple of different butters like that, you'll find out that yes, butters do totally taste different. And that obviously will translate in your baking, depending on the butter you use. So we've added the melted butter, and I had poured 2 tablespoons of orange blossom water. Another thing, it's called orange blossom water. So a lot of it is going to evaporate. So that's why it calls for tablespoons and not teaspoons. And it's not a mistake or a typo. It is the right amount because most of it's going to evaporate to leave you just the taste. So that's pretty much it. So it's a very simple, straightforward. As I said, this is just a half recipe. It's just going to make you like a tin of 12 mini muffin cakes, which we call bites. But the recipe comes for 24. And then I'm just gonna pour, just use a regular spoon. Just pour a spoon in each of the little cups. You don't have to line the cups, but I like the line ones to line them because then you don't have to grease the tin, and then you just get the cakes out and rinse the tin with water, and you're good for the next batch of deliciousness. So I'm just gonna do it, pour them all because I want to bake them for you so you can see them before the end. And then we're gonna add, so usually you add some nice orange, candied peel orange, and you can either make it yourself or you can buy it. So I couldn't find just orange today, so I just bought the fruit mix, the candied fruit mix, and that's okay. It's Christmas, so you can have some little greenery, some little green and some little red flakes and orange. And you're gonna bake for 10 minutes without the topping, and then we're gonna pull the tin out of the oven, quickly drop a couple pieces of fruit, of candied fruit inside, and put it back in the oven for 10 minutes. Because if you put the candied peel for 20 minutes, you're just basically gonna have a burnt gooey mess at the end. It's gonna caramelize, it's gonna ooze, and it's gonna eventually kind of burn. So it won't be pretty, and you want it to be looking pretty. So we're gonna go ahead and put this for 10 minutes in the oven. Brittany, you know, you can just rush over here after 7 to get some. And so here we go. So in the oven for 10 minutes. So 10 minutes, put my timer on. In 10 minutes, we will put the little candied fruits. So that's it. So I tell you one thing that this class has improved my baking with in general, on my life personally, is I now make a point to put all my ingredients, prepare them ahead of time instead of taking the bulk of flour and taking the bag of sugar and, you know, picking and poking out of the cupboard things that I need. I just prepare everything out, and makes it so much easier to just concentrate on the mixing and on the steps. And usually it helps not forgetting any steps or things like that. So prep is really important in baking too. So now I'm going to talk about these little pretties here, which are the little cookies with the jam. So like I said, we call them sablés, but some people call them the Linzer cookies, but Linzer cookies have a little different composition. And so it's basically jam filled. There's 2 sablés. So there's a base and there's a top. And so a couple tips about those. When you roll the dough and you use the cookie cutters, make them in pairs. What I mean by that is you have your base cutter and you have your top cutter. So I got some pretty ones here, by the way. All Christmas themed, like angel and tree and snowflake, and they work really well. They're stainless steel, which is important. If you buy cookie cutters like that, try to look for stainless steel. So when you have your dough all rolled out and you cut your base and your tops, a tip so you don't have too many tops but not enough base, or the other way around, and then you have to re-roll the dough and roll more, cut more, make them in pairs. So if you cut a base, you immediately cut a top, cut a base, cut a top, cut a base, cut a top. I know it's simple, it's stupid, but it works. So in the end, you'll have the same amount. And then what I did also is I baked all the bases on one baking sheet, and I baked all the tops on another baking sheet. And I'll show you why after. So for those, what was really important is those are sablés. So the little flecks you see are from the almond flour. Yes, it uses a little almond flour again. It's half almond flour and all-purpose flour. So if I had used the blanched flour, they would be completely white, which doesn't matter because they're going to be sprinkled with confectioner's sugar, so it doesn't matter. And what was really important in those two was it said 10 to 12 minutes max. So when it gives you an amplitude for baking, always choose the lower one. Don't be like, oh, well, 12 because I want them, done well or something. Choose the 10. At 10, look in there. And if it looks like it's ready, then pull them out. So this kind of sablés, they're like shortbread you can touch, Leo. If it doesn't leave any indentation, they're done. Just lightly touching. And those, the important thing was do not let them color at any cost. Once they color, they become hard as a rock when they cool down. So kind of the same principle as the speculoos. I like the size of the cutters I chose because those, when you give them in a little baggie or a little box for Christmas, they're like a 1 bite, which is nice. I've done cherry preserves, and I've done apricot preserves. I have homemade jams downstairs, but I just didn't get them. I have blueberry. You don't want something too runny. You want something that's pretty jelly, and you don't want something with pieces of fruit inside, because if there's pieces of fruit, you're gonna have a hard time pressing the top on the bottom, and it's gonna either break the top or look all clunky. So you want something that's kind of a good even consistency. You can also make homemade caramel out of like dulce de leche, out of a can of condensed milk, sweetened condensed milk. You cook it like in your pressure cooker or in a pan for a really long time on slow. And you can fill those with caramel. You can also fill them with chocolate paste slash not Nutella. But you know what I mean. So you just don't want it to be runny because you want it not to ooze out of the sides of the cookies, so that when the person takes it, they don't have their hands all sticky, and that the filling, we shouldn't really see the filling. The filling should be like that, like so it's in there, you see it, but it's not like coming all the way to the edges. So the other reason why I said we should bake the tops on one baking sheet, the bottoms on another one. Those cookies, once they're done, you can let them cool for a couple of minutes on the baking sheet itself. So leave them on the parchment paper baking sheet. And then those cookies, the tops, you want to dust them, obviously, before you put the jam in. So before you stick them on the jam part. So the tops, so I'm going to move my bottoms here. I'm going to get my bases, my tops, and sprinkle dust the confectioner's sugar on top. And if there's a little too much here, you just tap slightly and it will come off. And so you just want them to be, just dusted. And so that's why you wanted them separate, because if they're on the same plate or baking sheet than your bases, you're going to have your bases covered with confectioner's sugar, and that's not what you wanted. You just want the tops sprinkled. And that's just basically a regular strainer. I call that a tea strainer myself, but and just dust. And you really don't need much. I mean, you really need a pinch. So you have your tops, they're ready. And then I'll show you. a good tool instead of a spoon is a butter knife. Or you can also do peanut or almond butter if that's something you like, but obviously you really don't want to do that in a cookie swap or something for people other than you. So you don't know if people are allergic or don't like peanut. So you just put a nice layer on and try to match up, and voila, you have a really nice sablé. And those will keep in a metal tin too, or they'll keep, like all those I'm planning to distribute tomorrow. I'm gonna finish all the other part of the dough I have, and I'm gonna go around, start to make my Christmas rounds and go around and make the all Christmas deliveries tomorrow. And I figured that by tomorrow night they'll be most likely eaten. So that's nice. I would say my only disappointment was the speculoos. One, because the embossing rolling pin didn't work right. And two, because I would probably make them smaller, or I'm gonna try to work on finding a windmill cutter or some template I can find on the internet maybe. But I'm gonna find something, because those speculoos, I mean, they're great, they're gonna taste great, but I would like them to have a little more appeal. That's all. So hold on. So it looks like we are 10 minutes for the little orange bites. So I'm gonna get them out of the oven, and I'm gonna put the candy peel on top. So it smells fabulous. And as you can see, it's risen nicely, even though there's no leavening agent other than the egg. And so I'm just gonna do simple, a little bit like that, just to add a nice touch, a different texture. Trying not to burn myself, so I'm gonna put it down. But it will be a different texture, and give it a little crunch. And same, those will probably keep for 2 or 3 days. Another thing I wanted to tell you about keeping things with butter, things like that, if you put them in the fridge after they've cooled down, all you're going to achieve is the molecules from the butter, the fat, is going to kind of like become cohesive again. And you're gonna, the next time when you get them out of the fridge and you want to eat one, even if you warm it up, like you keep it on the counter for an hour or two, it's just gonna taste different. It's just, there's no way around it. The butter is gonna kind of congeal together, and it's not gonna taste the same as it tasted out of the oven, and or if you had kept it in a box on the counter for a couple of days. So I would say I would give them a couple of days. And so we have a mix. We have some that are all orange. We have some with the green celery, some with the cherry. So back in the oven for 10 minutes. And those, we should see a little color out of them at the end. They should have a nice, decently browned little top, little cone-shaped top, which would make it nice. Yeah, so I was talking about butter. A lot of people are like, oh, it's gonna have gone bad if I don't put in the fridge and stuff. Things don't go bad in a day. Even if there's butter in it, the butter has been cooked. So all the molecular structure has changed, and so it's not gonna go. Of course, if you wait for a week with it on the counter, yes, it's gonna go rancid. But I would give it like 2 to 3 days. It's fine. That's why I'm gonna distribute my cookies tomorrow. And even if people don't eat them by like Monday, it's still gonna be fine. So that's the other thing. I want to give a note about keeping your butter on the counter also, because some people had asked me before. So my rule is, I know I've seen those little butter holders in the water cup thingy in here. I can tell you, I've never seen those in France in my life. Never heard of them. Butter, it's in the fridge. And then if you're going to use it within like 3-4 hours, or you're going to bake cookies like tonight, get your butter out in the morning before you go run errands or go to work, do something else, that's fine. But butter should not sit on your counter, should not sit next to your stove, especially, because butter will get rancid, even though you know, it's pasteurized here and everything. It will get rancid. So my rule is, get the butter out that you're gonna use. Like if you're gonna make a roux for Cajun dish or something, and you know you're gonna need, you know, like 4 tablespoons of butter, just cut 4 tablespoons, get them out next to your counter. And yes, it's gonna warm up, get to room temperature, which is nicer to work with than working with it right from the fridge. But you don't need to have butter 24/7 on your counter. It's, I mean, you're not gonna get poisoned by it, but it's definitely gonna get eventually a weird taste, and that's not the correct way to store butter, nor is it the correct way to store in water. So that's pretty much it. I'm gonna wait for the moelleux to be done, and I would like to answer some questions. These cookies be frozen? Yes. So the cookies with the jam, it's gonna be kind of weird if you freeze them. But the speculoos, you can freeze them. The tea cookies, you can freeze them. I would not put chocolate on the tea cookies. Okay, I would take the tea cookies, freeze them, and then when you're ready to consume, so give them, put the chocolate on it, on them. Just because when you thaw them, when you get them out of the fridge, unless you like, some people like to eat the cookies right out of the freezer, but otherwise it's gonna get sticky, like tacky. Okay. You can freeze, you can bake and freeze all your sablés, and then assemble them when you're ready. You get them out of the freezer, right from there. You assemble them, you do the finished product. That's fine. The moelleux, yeah, it's fine, because you can freeze muffins, so they're kind of like the same family. So yeah, absolutely. You can freeze most of everything, even though, you know, not especially in the complete finished state. You can at some point freeze them. Yes. And you can also freeze the dough. In France, we never roll the dough like we do here and then cut the cookies, but you could do that. You could make all the necessary doughs, and then just freeze them in logs, and then cut them to the same thickness that you would have in rolling it. That's fine too. Yeah. Have people already started to make cookies for their cookie swap?
If you're having trouble typing into the chat, you can also feel free to unmute yourself to ask a question or share what recipes you're using.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, just unmute and we can chat. No, everybody's shy. Oatmeal. Can you
Hi,
read it?
Veronique. It's Joanne Baker. I haven't started yet, but you certainly have inspired me.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad. That's my mission. So I am glad. And maybe since you're not far, some cookies will find your way tomorrow.
Oh my, that I would kind of love that. That would be perfect. And you know, I also will make note of the book that you had recommended. I didn't have a chance to write that down, but it looks like a great cookbook for the cookie book, you know?
Yeah, except it's
recipe
in
book.
French. So you'll need to hire me to do translations unless
Oh,
you
it's
speak
in French.
I'm sorry, it's a French book.
Well, that's okay. Maybe you
But
could give
that's
me some
okay.
lessons.
Exactly. Yes, I will. Can you read the questions, Trisha? It's
Yes,
going too fast.
absolutely. So we have Eileen was chiming in that she's just started to make her cookies, some oatmeal craisin white chip cookies and some gingerbread men cookies.
Nice.
Brittany asked if for the link for the rolling pin. If we could.
Okay, yeah, I will
do
send that. Yeah, I will add that to the recipe thing.
Great.
The linzer cutters. I was the sablés, like, you know, those little cookie cutters for the jam cookies. I was really impressed because I had some I actually threw last week because they were so miserable. So I'll send the link to all that.
Carol and Molly were asking if you would consider jam cookies easy for beginners.
Yes.
All right.
Yes. And as usual, anybody can feel free to email Trisha if they have any questions, if they try to do something that I talked about tonight with the recipes, after they get the email with the recipes and they have like an issue or something or a question, they can always like email Trisha and Trisha can email me. Or Trisha, you can even put my email. I'm happy to answer questions because I want people to do something with the class. Like I want you to try, even if it's just once and you're like, oh yeah, that's not for me, or oh wow, that's cool, maybe I'll try some other things, you know, inspired from that. I really like that.
And please feel free to send us pictures of what you come up with. Phyllis and Ralph sent some wonderful pictures of the Thanksgiving sides that they had done, and that was great to see. Also, Miss Phyllis says, not shy, we usually bake Scottish shortbread.
Nice. And Miss Phyllis, look, I'm wearing the apron you gave me last Christmas.
Perfect. And
And it's lovely.
Eileen says, thank you for all the helpful hints.
Okay, and I'm gonna, before everybody quits, I'm just gonna get out they have 1 minute left, but see our little bites, and the top is starting to be kind of like almost crackly, like a crackling. So the top, the surrounding part is gonna be kind of like a little hard, but the inside will be soft. And that's really the texture of those bites. It's like a couple different textures all at once, and the taste with the flavor. So they're gonna go back, but I wanted to show you. And those are so easy to make. I mean, you know, to make the 12, like we need 1 egg and about a tablespoon of butter. So those those are not things that require a lot of ingredients. So not especially costly. And like I said, you don't need to go out of your way to find different odd things. I mean, I would say other than the orange blossom water. And a last note on that, you could probably try to use orange juice if you couldn't find this and you really wanted to try the orange taste without the alcohol content of like Cointreau or Grand Marnier. You can probably do like a tablespoon, like half the amount of liquid in orange juice. So I'll add that to the recipe before I send it, just so that people have that. Well, Merry Christmas, everybody. Thank you so much for being here for the class, and I hope you have a lovely holiday season. Send me photos of your cookies, whichever you make, and I just want to see what everybody makes. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Vero. This was great. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank
Thank you for
you.
having us.
Great.
That's
Thank
really
you.
interesting.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Good
Merry
night.
Christmas, everybody. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.